Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hi friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the pleasure of connecting with Mark Patton, CEO of Colony Hardware, based in Orange, Connecticut. Having grown up in the same industry, I've had the opportunity to watch Colony grow from a small New England entity into a fairly substantial organization with a footprint covering much of the central and eastern United States. This growth was fueled by a fairly aggressive acquisition and greenfield startup strategy. Without their relationship with private equity partners, this growth would not have been possible. Mark is a wealth of information for organizations looking to scale up. I hope you enjoy our conversation. This episode is brought to you by HMI Performance Incentives. In today's economic environment, distributors need to invest in innovative sales and marketing strategies. Loyalty incentive programs are used by small to mid-sized organizations each and every day. Last year, I had the opportunity to do an episode with their Chief Strategy Officer, Lincoln Smith. One of the things I enjoyed about our conversation was that I came away with a sense that HMI really understands how these programs can help distributors. You can learn more about HMI performance incentives at www.hmiaward.com or connect with them on LinkedIn at HMI Performance Incentives. Be sure to let them know you heard about them from me, Jason Bader, on the Distribution Talk podcast. All right, Mark. Hey, welcome to Distribution Talk. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on with me.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. Happy to be here.
Yeah, I think it'll be, and you've got an interesting past, an interesting journey. Your organization is one of the big, the preeminent and growing organizations in that staffed construction supply market. Would you mind giving me a little history lesson, not only on Colony itself, but where you came from and how you got involved with distribution?
Sure. I started my career at GE and went through their financial management, training program. Was there for about 5 years. Got my MBA in the evening when I was there in operations management. So I was always kind of interested in operations. After that, went to work for a company called Ferguson Enterprises, which was kind of rolling up and consolidating the plumbing supply space.
Sure.
I got involved there in doing mergers and acquisitions, and then was able to make a natural transition into operations management and then, general management and eventually, district management with Ferguson. So I started my career on the financial side, but then through the kind of M&A area, got involved in operations and general management and kind of really took a, liking to that and became very passionate about that. And that's kind of the way, my career took that way.
It's interesting to say that because I see that in a lot of financial people, either a CFO or a financial background, and then they gravitate towards that operations and they tend to be able to go in there and mix it up pretty well. So.
Yeah, I think in wholesale distribution, there's a lot of metrics and KPIs, managing assets and inventory turns and, customers and customer profitability and stuff like that. So I think good financial training and, experience is a real plus.
And often a lot of the distributors don't have that. They're a bunch of sales cowboys. They were salespeople that didn't like their boss and they said, I think I can do it my way. Yeah. And they do lack that financial background. Yep. And the most successful distributors I've met over the years had, at least either the owner or the founder of that company or, one of the partners be that financial arm that, really had that training and that background.
Yeah, I think that's important. The gentleman that started Ferguson Enterprises, David Peoples, he told me one time, surround yourself with people that are different than you. If they're like you, then you're really not going to gain anything. So I think, you have to have strong sales skills and operational skills and, financial management skills, and all those things really come together and click together. You really get a world-class team.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've seen, as I said, some of the best partnerships. I can recall one down in the Southeast years ago that, you had that dynamic, hard-charging salesperson, the gregarious face of the company. And then you had the person who hung on to the purse strings, and they understood that side. And it was a great mix between the two of them.
Oh, yeah.
Great. Yeah.
So. Absolutely. I came to Colony Hardware about 10 years ago. When I came to the company, I actually joined the company. We were right around 40 million in sales at that time, 3
Yeah.
locations. I joined as the COO and the CFO. So the company wasn't
Hmm.
really big enough to split those off at the time. So have, focused on growing the business and bringing the right people into the business in the right spots. And, it's just been a really exciting time to be in the tool, fastener, safety, wholesale industry. It's really been fun.
Now, the company, prior to you coming on, they had brought in a financial partner, brought in that
Right.
private equity
Yep.
partner. And can you give any insight on that decision? Why did they decide? And it's also right in '07, wasn't it? I mean, it was right there in the,
Yeah.
the dark years of
Right before the Great Recession.
right before. Yeah.
I think if
Yeah.
you want to expand, you have to have capital. So you got to get it somewhere. You either got to borrow it or you got to earn it, or you have to invest it yourself, or you have to get some other outside investors. So the ownership at that time saw an opportunity to grow and expand and consolidate and scale in somewhat of a fragmented space. One of the
Yeah.
partners kind of wanted to exit the business at that time. So
Oh, okay.
so it
Yeah.
was kind of a good strategy and good timing. And then, unfortunately, the Great Recession hit and everything went in a little bit of a holding pattern there for a couple years or so. But as we came out of that, we really, started to make some strategic investments in opening facilities and acquiring other businesses. And we have 40 locations now in, 11 or 12 states.
Yeah, it's interesting because that funding came in prior to that recession. I mean, you all probably were in pretty darn good shape coming out of the backside of that, whereas a lot of folks were trying to lick their wounds. And a lot of them, let's face it, a lot of the ones that weren't financially managed well ceased to exist.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, that was not a good time to be overly leveraged. That's for sure.
For sure. Yeah. Interesting. So, all right, you came on, you said in 2011
Yep.
or 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, January
Okay.
2011. So it's been
Yeah.
10 years now. And what we've really focused on is growing the business. And in order to grow and scale a distribution business like ours, I think you really need to focus on expanding the footprint.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of our strategic objectives, either through acquisition or through greenfield startup. We want to continually expand that footprint. And we have that expansion strategy around where we think civil and commercial construction is going to be the best over a 5 or 7 year time horizon. So we look to make those investments where we think it makes sense. Also, continuing to build and invest in a strong and sustainable infrastructure.
Yeah.
Material handling equipment, warehouse management equipment, systems, technology, facilities, distribution centers. So fleet, you have to have that strong, sustainable logistics backbone as you expand that footprint. So we really place a lot of emphasis on that. And then hiring and training and developing and bringing the best people that we can into the organization. We have a full-time college recruiting initiative where we've targeted certain schools to bring folks into the industry and into the business. And then we put them through a 30-week rotational training program that we call the distribution leadership program, where they pull orders, they do receiving, they, make deliveries, they stock shelves, they work in the store, they work in purchasing. Over that 30-week period, we really get a good feel for what's their real cup of tea. Are they a salesperson? Are they more of a operator type person? So, that's really what we've focused on pretty consistently for the last, 10 years. It's just expand the footprint, invest in the infrastructure, and just get the best talent we can find into the business.
If I could take a couple minutes and talk about that talent acquisition piece, because that's kind of an interesting deal. I know that, my younger brother, his company does the same. He has a very similar type of program here. And, one of the things that you had mentioned is during this 30-week period, as you were going through trying to figure out maybe where this person is most talented, because there was always this progression that was in distribution. It was, I would say, an old progression, but people would start working in the warehouse and they would drive trucks and that was kind of they'd spend some time there and pay their dues. Then they would move to maybe a counter sale, will call position, then move to the inside sales, and then maybe be anointed the outside sales role, with the keys to the car and the credit card and whatnot. But that doesn't work for everybody.
Right.
That is not the path for everyone. And I think for a long time, again, when I was growing up in the business, we were forced through that path. And it's changed now. And I think that companies like yours have recognized that not everybody is looking for that outside sales. That's not the omnipotent position anymore.
Right.
There's other pieces. But do you all do, and this is kind of where I'm roundabout going to my question here, is during that period of time of evaluation, do you use testing of any kind, personality profiling and those types of things?
We use a tool, and it's just a tool, one among many, called a
Yeah.
predictive index.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I like PI. I think it's a
Yeah,
good
we kind of use
tool.
that on the as a screening tool on the way in to better understand where
Okay.
a person might be a fit, what their motivations are going to be. We try to, when we're interviewing for the training program, we kind of use like a panel approach. It's just so important to get that good cultural fit.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because it comes from all different kind of majors. We've had business majors, supply chain majors, English majors, history majors.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you hire someone that's competitive, they have a real sense of urgency, they have good attention to detail, they're going to be successful. And as you know, our industry and our business is very hands-on. It's not
Hmm.
software engineering, or you have to be willing to get your hands dirty, and you have
Sure.
to be willing to do whatever it takes. The warehouse is backed up and you're the branch manager, and you got to go out back and receive some material or load some trucks, or, whatever needs to be done. So we really try to select for those kind of, those kind of traits. But we do use the PI on the way in, is just help us understand what's going to motivate that person a little bit better, and kind of how their chips have been programmed.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated. Again, when I was in the business, it's now 17 years ago, we didn't use a tool like this. And I really think back to some of the people that I really did them a disservice, because they were phenomenal from an organizational standpoint. And they really should have gone on to more of an operational or branch management type of role. But we stuck them in the car and said, hey, go sell stuff.
Right.
And they didn't do well and lost them,
Yeah.
and we lost somebody who was exceptional in another area. And we just felt we were so married to that silly progression that we lost really great people. And so
Yeah.
I appreciate this, really trying to understand the person better.
Yeah. Yeah. We've done that too, I think. And we've had folks that kind of, they went into outside sales and they just weren't a good outside salesman, or
Right.
we tried to make them a buyer and they weren't really a buyer. They didn't want to sit and look at the computer screen all day long. The other thing that we do with the PI is, when we started using that a couple years ago, we said, hey, let's give it to like our 10 best drivers and our 10 best 5 or 6, best buyers. And then when we get that graph from a particular person, we could say, yeah, they look like a successful outside sales rep that we've have on board now, or they appear, to be, if you're interviewing someone to be a driver or whatever, yeah, they look like a really good driver. So, I mean, it isn't the only thing we look at, but it's helpful.
Well, again, I think it's a data-driven approach,
Sure.
and that's really, I'm a huge fan of data-driven approaches, and I really like that, building that profile. And I've shared that with different companies over the years that build a profile, and we've looked at it from a customer standpoint. Build a profile of that is this particular type of customer. These are the categories they tend to buy from. So there's, again, a data-driven look at it, but looking at employees and onboarding, because it's so expensive and it's so frustrating sometimes, that having that profile built. No, I think that's fantastic. I ran across a company years ago and actually sat in on the predictive index meeting. I think PI is a franchise. I think that's their model.
Mm-hmm.
But I sat in on one in Arizona, and the gentleman was sharing how they built their outside sales profile. And it was really pretty fascinating, that they had scores. I think it was 5 different areas that they, were ranking people on, prospecting, initial relationship building, closing, et cetera. There was these different indexes, and they had numbers assigned to it. And it was kind of funny. I was sitting next to a young outside sales guy, and he's like, oh man, I'm in trouble. He's looking at his scores thinking,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to be here all that long. But it is really, when companies embrace that, it can be a real game changer. I think it can be a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it can be helpful.
Yeah. So going back, some of the infrastructure plays that, you all have done, some of the big things in the technology. I mean, this has got to be a big one, especially as you're acquiring new companies. Are all the locations now on the same software distribution software package, on the same base package, or do you still have a few outliers that you're trying to get in? And
For, several years, we've had a full-time integration team.
okay,
So what they would do is they would look at a particular location and they would start, right away, even before we closed the acquisition, they would start and, cross-referencing the product file and identifying any vendors that were anomalies. We averaged about 16 weeks for a full integration. So
okay,
from the time we closed the deal until they were live on our system and operating, it was on average about 16 weeks. So we really felt like we had to drive that. The system is kind of the common bond among the whole company. And that way
yeah,
it's just easier for them to see all the inventory in the distribution centers and the other locations, makes it easier to move people around between locations,
hmm,
makes it easier to make sure we're getting all the right pricing and right deals and all that kind of stuff. So as of, I'll say, about a year or so ago, all of our locations were on the same system. We decided that we're going to migrate all of Colony over to the NetSuite platform.
okay,
So we have
okay,
two acquisitions that are currently running Profit 21,
yeah,
our operations in Texas and our operations in Tennessee. We didn't want to convert them twice.
gotcha,
We didn't want
yep,
to convert them to Fax and then convert them to NetSuite. We said, okay, why don't you guys just go in the queue and then, you'll get on NetSuites when everybody else is on NetSuite. So right now we
okay,
have all the companies running on Fax, which is an N4 product, and then we have two
sure,
locations running Profit 21. But I've always emphasized and always, really stressed that, hey, there's good things and bad things about every system, but it's best for everybody to be on the same system.
right,
And
right,
the worst thing you could do is when you're trying to scale or consolidate a particular space or market is you go do a whole bunch of acquisitions and you wind up, you got 18 different computer systems and you just got to do it because I think the people oftentimes are primed for that change and there's kind of a
mhm.
window there. If you let it lay around too long, it can become very problematic. And I think it's easier if you just get it over with.
Yeah, definitely the rip the band-aid
Yeah,
approach.
yeah, just get it over with. And any system, there's going to be good things, there's going to be bad things. Typically
Sure.
we were bringing more functionality and other things like that, even though it might not be exactly the same. But typically the technology that we were bringing was more in a lot of respects than what the acquired entity had in the past.
Yeah. It's interesting, Mark, that if you think about that distribution software package or that ERP, many people in the organization, they are intimate with that for 7 to 8 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
That is that common bond, kind of as you were speaking of, that they can be pretty emotional about that as well,
Yeah,
especially if they're going to be moving to another platform or moving over. So that's, definitely something as you're acquiring a company that's probably a fairly difficult challenge, and hence the 16 weeks. I mean, I
yeah,
think that's a big piece of it.
yeah. We always do a fairly significant onboarding event when we have a new group that's joining the Colony family. So that's one of the things we talk about. And we say, hey, here's the timeline. Here's kind of what the process is going to be. We try to get some of those folks to other locations. Maybe they've never
Hmm.
worked with RS scanners in a warehouse management system before, so
Yeah, yeah,
they can actually come see it and they can spend a couple days and work alongside some other guys and just makes it a little bit easier. If it's there's a lot of fear of the unknown, but
for sure.
the more you can expose people to help manage the change and all that's just going to be a little bit easier and make them more comfortable and you develop some local champions too. Like, wow, I went to the Chicago distribution center and I saw this and it really works great. And
Sure. No, you absolutely have to. I mean, I think you're right. That champion, because I can recall years and years ago of putting together that WMS package for the first time and people being afraid that if they hit a certain button, the company's going to blow up.
right,
It's just,
right.
there's fear of that
Yeah,
unknown, and how is this going to work? And yeah, it definitely, there is some emotional fear,
sure.
around that you've got to overcome, and you've got to spend some time around
Yeah.
as well. Now, you said you've grown the footprint pretty significantly over the years through both acquisition and greenfield. Do you have a preference which way?
That's really interesting. If you think about an acquisition,
Yeah.
think about what you're getting. You're getting an assembled workforce, an assembled customer base, someone that's already in the market.
Yeah.
So you're plugging into that, but there's a cost to that.
There is. Oh
And,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and at the same time, there can be, in an acquisition, there can be downsides as well. You inherit the baggage, you inherit bad business practices. Maybe they got the wrong product lines. Maybe the service isn't what it should be.
Hmm.
Maybe they have some people they should have parted ways with, but they just never did. So there's good and bad. The flip side is if you're doing a greenfield startup,
Yeah.
you get to build it the way you want to build it,
Right.
but there's going to be more of a startup phase there, ramping up. So you're going to have to be able to handle the maybe some startup losses and some initial
Hmm.
market penetration type activities and costs and things, but you get the opportunity to start from a clean slate. I've always preferred doing acquisitions just
Hmm.
because I love doing acquisitions, and I think
Yeah.
that we don't always we probably pass on as many acquisitions as we actually consummate because
Hmm.
it has to be a really good cultural fit.
Yeah.
It always doesn't have to be the best price or the best economic circumstances, and a valuable business is worth a premium. But oftentimes, if it's just not going to be a cultural fit, then it might make more sense just to do a startup.
Oh, I'll tell you, Mark, I've run across some cultural misfits. It was, failure to do due diligence, really to look under the sheets and to look, to find out what's really going on. And I hate to say this, but people can look really smart twice a year when you see them at conferences,
Mm-hmm.
and then you start working with them and it's not so good anymore. It just
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
it blows up. So yeah, I can see that. I mean, I think that there are those cultural differences that can really make it tough. And oftentimes it's the owner of the organization. It's the previous owner. And, they have a difficulty coming into that if they stay on.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a difficulty, my friend Michael Marks likes to say, it's tough to be a pawn if you were the king, at that point, after a little
Right.
bit. So speaking of that, do you often have owners, the previous owner, stay on with the organization? Is that common in your acquisitions?
Yeah, I think it's happened in all of our acquisitions. I think it's important from a continuity perspective.
Hmm.
Some people, depending on where they're at, a particular stage of their career, they may stay a year or two and retire
Yeah.
because this is kind of their exit strategy.
Yeah.
Or we still have previous owners that sold their business to us, that are working for us today
Hmm.
as general managers and regional managers and branch managers and other things like that. So it really, I actually prefer that because I think it
Yeah.
shows a real continuity to the associates and the market and the customers. Again,
Hmm.
assuming that we've made a good selection up front about who we're going to partner with,
Sure.
then,
Sure.
typically they've, built a strong team and they have a great relationship in the local market. So we want them to stay.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, a lot of those folks will actually become shareholders of the company.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, they want to
Good.
invest, because they like what they see. They want to be part of it. They still want that pride of ownership and be an owner, especially if they're going to continue to work another 10, 15 years.
Well, it's nice that there's that option, that availability. I think that where I've seen challenges to this is when that there isn't that opportunity to become an equity owner in the organization they join, and going to a W-2 employee. That's tough.
Mhm.
That can be very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And often I see them last maybe a couple of years at best.
Yeah.
Maybe 3.
Well, we
So.
usually make that available as an option. We don't ever require it. So
Mhm.
I'll usually bring it up and tell people, hey, I'm not going to bring it up again, but this is an option for you. We're not in
Yeah.
the business of selling stock. We're in the business of growing great businesses. But we've had an awful lot of people do that.
You said you passed on a
Mhm.
lot of deals.
Mhm.
What are, I guess, if I were to say, what is an ideal, acquisition candidate? I mean, what are some of the things that they really kind of need to be to kind of pass the Mark sniff test real quick?
I think, I mean, again, the main thing is it a cultural fit for Colony? We're not
Yeah.
very bureaucratic. We're not very corporate. If I pull up in front of the place with the owner and he's got a sign with a reserved parking spot, it's probably not going
Yeah.
to, you can tell right away if what.
Sure.
So the owners that have built really strong teams that ask about their people, that really want to advocate for their people, that have really top tier product lines, similar customer base, customer segments that we sell to.
Yeah.
I think, generally higher margins, higher quality organization that the customers are willing to pay a little bit
Hmm.
more because there's something there. Either
Yeah.
they love the service, they love the fill rates or whatever. So,
Hmm.
generally those are kind of the things that we look at. I mean, you've been in enough places. When you walk in a place, you can get a vibe. Is it a good vibe?
Very quickly.
Are the
Oh
guys
yeah.
that, when you walk in the door, do the folks on the counter, look you in the eye and say, "Hey, how's it going? What do you need? What can we do for you?" Do they all have on a nice shirt that says ABC Supply or whatever?
Sure.
Or, do they all got their heads down and slumped shoulders and shelves are half empty and, all that kind of stuff. So it's compilation of things. You get a feel for
Hmm.
kind of what's going on.
Sure. Oh, absolutely. I absolutely have been around enough times.
Yeah.
Times when I walked into a warehouse and I'm looking up and I'm seeing product teetering on a shelf coming down. And I'm thinking, I'm not walking down that aisle.
Yeah.
There's no way, man. I'm
Yeah.
going to get brained here in a minute. But
Yeah.
you can definitely tell. I'll be honest with you, lighting makes a big difference. Just
Absolutely it does.
I go into a place and it's well lit and people, are clean and
You can
neat.
feel the energy
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
positively or negatively. You really can.
Absolutely.
And is the
Absolutely.
business growing and is it in a market that, we think is strategic for us that's going to part of expanding that footprint around where we think civil and commercial construction is going to be good for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and reading the tea leaves isn't all that easy. I mean,
Yeah.
especially if you've got as you said, 5 to 7 year, time horizon, you're looking out and seeing what's going on. Is there any data source that you look at to kind of look for, what's going to happen in the future in a market?
It's hard to get really good information on what's going to happen for our specific industry. You
Hmm.
can't find a report of tools, fastener, and safety sales. But
Yeah.
what you can do is you can kind of, utilize some surrogates and get some things going in the right direction. Here's an outfit called CMD Group, used to be the
Yeah.
Reconstruction Data. They
Yep.
have a lot
Yep.
of information on non-residential starts, civil commercial spend and other
Hmm.
stuff like that. So that's kind of a good indicator. Actually, a lot of the manufacturers, if you ask them, have information that they will share, economic forecasts and stuff that they use in their own kind of planning process. They'll share that information oftentimes if you ask them.
Speaking of suppliers, have you ever been approached by a supplier saying, "Hey, I've got a hole in the market. Would you be interested in filling it?"
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we have a really good footprint, I think, and with
Yeah.
our hub and spoke distribution network, I think a lot of manufacturers know that we can really drive results. I mean, we don't just take on a line to have 15 different lines of safety glasses. I mean, if we take on a line,
Yeah.
we're really going to make a commitment to stock it, train, get it on the website, get it in the catalog, promote it. So I think that the vendors and suppliers that we deal with know that we can move the numbers and we can drive product and have a really, really good footprint in the markets that we serve.
So, Mark, going back to kind of looking at those acquisition candidates, what was shared with me, years ago was that really to be an attractive acquisition candidate, the company needed to have, 3 locations was kind of that magic number. Have you, gotten involved with smaller entities than that, or is there a certain size that you're kind of looking for?
No, I don't think it really. We've had groups join the colony team that had 8 locations or 1 location. So
Okay.
I think it's just a matter of, is it a strong team? Is it something that we think that we can build around? Is the group going to be receptive to that? One particular acquisition that we did in 2015, they were doing like 4 million in sales from 1 location, and
Yeah.
now they're doing like 12 million in sales.
Okay.
It was in a market that we wanted to be in. We thought, hey, they're not really selling safety, they don't really have any ladder business, and hey, let's get a truck in there every day from the distribution center. And
Hmm.
do we have the right kind of folks that are going to want to jump on that and drive revenue and learn the new products and all those kind of things? And so it's not really, I mean, there's really no particular size. I will say
Okay.
that the cost to do an acquisition is the cost to do an acquisition. So the cost to buy a $5 million company, when you consider all the diligence and the phase one
Yeah.
environmental reports and everything you got to do, all the legal work and everything, it's probably the cost to buy a $5 million company is probably about the same as the cost to buy a $50 million company
I
from
gotcha.
a
Okay.
transaction expense kind of standpoint.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
all else equal, if you could find a great company that was a cultural fit, bigger is better, but it's not really like a
Okay.
litmus test or anything that we use.
Going now to the other side, the greenfield startup, as you said, your preference is to look at acquisitions, but on the greenfield startups, I mean, obviously you have a much longer runway to get to a break even or profitable standpoint. Generally, how long do these take in your estimation? How long before you break even on a greenfield?
It varies. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. I mean, we opened
Yeah,
our
definitely.
we opened our location in the Bronx the month before Superstorm Sandy, so we broke even the first month.
There you go. Yeah.
We did a greenfield startup in Albany, and I think it was 5 or 6 months before we were profitable. Type, it's really good and a lower risk strategy if you do it in an adjacent territory, so that you
Hmm.
can
Yeah.
leverage infrastructure and assets and things that are already in place. That kind of lowers the risk and the break even point, obviously.
Gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I always used to say that I guess maybe not just to break even, but to actually get it to be where you got the right inventory in place and you're turning and earning, doing things.
Yeah.
I mean, it can take upwards of 18 months,
Oh
in
yeah.
some cases.
Yeah, it can. Before you hit your stride, it can be 18 to 36 months for sure.
Have you had to shut any down?
We did a consolidation. The only location that we shut was in Gainesville, Florida.
Okay.
We acquired a company down there called Bernie's, and
Yeah. Colorful character there of an owner.
Jacksonville is kind of the main market there, and it just seemed like it didn't really make sense to have a little twig location
Yeah.
in Gainesville when we could actually service the market better with 3 or 4 times a day, delivery down there when it was an hour away. So that's really, and we didn't really do that until we got into the COVID era. But that's
Gotcha.
the only one that we've actually shut down.
I've seen through my personal experience, seen hanging on to things a little too long where this thing was not going to be turning around. And boy, we thought we could make it turn around, but just hang on to those just a little longer than they probably should have been around. So
Yeah, generally, speaking of Dave Peebles again from Ferguson, he said, don't ever do with brick and mortar what you can do with trucks and tires. So that's a good rule of thumb.
absolutely. I mean, it is so funny when I facetiously talk to people, in companies or in front of audiences, and I ask people to raise their hand if they're a one location company, and they'll sheepishly raise their hand. I'm like, stay that way.
Yeah.
You'll be much happier. Stay there.
Yeah, the complexity does expand,
Yeah.
geometrically, not arithmetically when you add more locations. It really does.
It does. And I think, the point's well taken that you can do a lot with deliveries versus throwing down the location where it's awful difficult to get yourself out of that location. It's expensive to get yourself out of that location if it doesn't work out. You can stop. Hey, I just don't have to drive there anymore if I do it the other way. So
Absolutely.
no, that's interesting. Can we talk a little bit about this private equity and the relationship in there and how that fueled that growth? It's something that I think that a lot of distributors, especially privately held, tightly held organizations, have a lot of fear around. They really don't understand that world. So
Yeah. I actually think 15% or more of the US economy now is controlled by private equity. So our relationship is they're a shareholder. Certainly not all equity firms are the same. Some have different MOs or they have different skill sets that they bring or whatever, or they focus on different market segments. But we have board of directors and I'm on the board of directors and we have quarterly meetings, monthly check-ins. We've been very fortunate in that we've had really good, financial partners, but they are financial guys. They're not operators. They rely on us to run the business and operate the business and really function as shareholders. I think it helps you raise your game too if you feel like you have someone that's going to challenge you, maybe someone that can share experiences that they've seen in other companies. That's the other thing. It's not just financial, but private equity firms, I think they bring a lot of perspective because they're typically involved or have, maybe been involved with 100 different distribution companies. And,
right,
they've done a
right.
lot of transactions. So they have a lot of information available or sharing best practices or helping you network with people. So there is an advantage of kind of having that external board.
Yeah, it's that accountability. That's really kind of what it comes down to. I worked with a client a few years back that, was private equity backed, and they had some pretty high standards they were looking for, like 10% net and a certain margin expectation and whatnot. Whereas many people might think that is kind of overreaching or outrageous and outlandish. What I learned from this company, and especially working with the CFO and speaking with him, he said, what it did is it really pushed us to do things that we didn't think were possible. And so I've really changed my thoughts a little bit, just really to what you're saying, that a good equity partner does push you, and it pushes you beyond what you thought was possible. And I think that was the real message that I took out of it. And as I said, I've changed my thoughts on it, changed my opinions of them. So
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's an unknown thing for a lot of people.
I would agree with that. Absolutely. Unknown for sure.
Yeah. And we've actually had outside directors from different manufacturing and distribution backgrounds. So it's not, a bunch of private equity guys sitting around browbeating you all day long, but
Sure. Sure.
it's a way to access capital. And if you
Yeah.
want to grow, you're going to need capital. It's either you got to borrow it, you got to invest it yourself, you got to earn it, or you have to
Mhm.
go get other partners and shareholders. So we think of them as a partner or a shareholder alongside,
Mhm.
myself and other members of the management group that are, invested in the company.
And you had said that you were on your third partner here. And did you go out and find them, or did they buy the interest from the other, from your previous
Well,
equity
we've been
partner?
very fortunate in that, with the growth trajectory that we've been on and profitability of the company, there's different tiers of private equity firms. Some of them may specialize in, say, companies under $100 million. And there may be some that are kind of, that middle market that's maybe 100 to 300 million in revenue. And then there's other people that focus on companies, maybe 500 million or a billion or more. As we've kind of moved through that, we've been very fortunate in that we've had a really good track record. So we've been able to meet with a lot of different partners and had the luxury of kind of picking who we were going to partner with. So,
Great.
we haven't, dealt with any like turnaround firms or anything like
Yeah.
that. So we've had a really good track record. So we were able to partner, with like-minded folks that saw the opportunity to continue to scale up in this space.
I think that's again one of those unknowns, Mark, is that people who don't have any exposure to them, it's the one vision of shark. That's it.
Yeah.
It's this one vision of how those firms operate, because maybe they've heard horror stories or they've heard this or that, and they don't understand that you do actually have many different flavors of these organizations. And the company that I was referring to earlier, I think that they've had a couple different ones as well, and they've been able to really find people who augmented the business. It was a 1+1=3 rather than this dictatorial type of relationship.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think it's important to check references too. When we're looking at acquiring a particular company, I always say, hey, let me give you a dozen names of people to call that have sold their business to Colony and see what they say. And I think it's the same thing with private equity firms.
okay.
I think it's smart to say, hey, let me talk to not CEOs of companies you currently own, but let me talk to 4 or 5 CEOs of companies that you used to own.
Right.
And
Former portfolio
yeah.
that,
So
yes,
call them
yeah.
up and say, hey, what are these guys like to deal with? Did they drive you crazy over nothing, or are they, more strategic and, really try to be helpful and add value and help you network and all that kind of stuff. But it's really, for us, it's been access to equity capital that's helped us
Mhm.
maintain the proper capital structure and have the resources that we need to make investments in people and infrastructure and acquisitions.
And speaking of the acquisitions, do you still see a boatload of opportunity especially in the kind of the staff to related market?
Oh yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of, even in the markets that we're in, there's a lot of product line extension type acquisitions that we can do. And I mean, we're really just getting started.
Oh, that's great.
It's a huge market. If you just think of all the Sphere One members and Evergreen members and SAFTA members and ACDI members, I mean, there's
Oh, yeah.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that where it would really make sense to partner with someone like us.
Yeah, I mean, you start, really again, starting in that Northeast, but expanding down, you're really just moving down. What is the farthest west at this point? Trying to think.
I'd be Dallas, Fort Worth. Yeah.
Dallas, Fort Worth, and then, Chicago, as you said. Any Colorado, or have you gone that direction yet? Or, okay.
No, we're pretty
Yeah.
much east of the Mississippi, except for Texas.
Except for Texas. Okay. Interesting. Well, yeah, a lot of them out there, a lot of companies out there. I mean, I think that is one of the interesting things about Staffed. I mean, it's 1,200 member,
Yeah,
companies, and, a lot of them could be multi-generational, but there's a lot of them as well that, are aging to a certain point where raising their hand saying, okay, maybe it's
sure,
time,
sure,
to hang up the cleats.
absolutely.
And do you find people are reaching out to you, or are you having to find them?
Both.
Both. Okay.
We've acquired companies, and then maybe they know somebody, and
Mhm.
they'll owner of company A will say, "Hey, I was talking to owner of company B, and he's a good friend of mine, and he'd like to meet with you." So it's become kind of word of mouth. But we also do reach out to people. Oftentimes, it's a multi-year kind of a cultivation. It's a relationship.
Yeah.
A lot of folks aren't going to turn over kind of their baby or the business that they've built for 40 years to just any Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes down the road. They want to come visit us. They want to maybe see, some other people in our
Mhm.
organization, understand our culture. They're worried about a fit as much as we are. So
Sure.
a lot of these businesses, it's really their extended family. So they want to
Yeah.
make sure that they're going to be in good, competent hands to continue to grow and expand. A lot of strong customer relationships in a lot of the
Mhm.
companies that join Colony. So they want to make sure their customers are taken care of and treated right, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting you brought that up. I can remember back quite some time ago that when Whitecap was a big acquirer, that was the first big acquirers in the Staffta world. And I remember them coming and knocking on the door, and, my father, my brother, and I sitting down with the CEO and just, listening to what was coming out of their mouth. And we left that meeting, and I distinctly remember this. Well, first of all, the gentleman, and I think you probably know who I'm speaking of, but I won't name him. But hey, come outside, you got to look at my jet. And that was kind of the first impression. It was like showing off the private jet, and I was like,
Yeah.
man, okay. We're like, okay, that's interesting. And then after the meeting, I can remember, my dad looking at us and saying, "That's an awful lot of money, but do we want to put our employees in these hands?"
Yeah.
And that was just really something that we talked about pretty heavily, that boy, there was an awful lot of money there, but man, we just couldn't do it. And I think that sounds like a lot of the people that you're dealing with.
Yeah. I think what's kind of unique about us is we're industry folks. We're
Yeah.
green members, and they know us and
Yeah.
hear about
Yeah.
us, and they see our people getting certified at the annual conference and see us
Right.
going up there, getting awards. And our major vendors are their major vendors. So they can call up
Right.
and say, "Hey, what about these guys in green there? Tell us about them."
Yeah. Yeah.
Or, they can call a dozen other guys that have sold their businesses to us and say, "Hey, what really happened? Did they do what they said? How'd they treat the people? Did they deal fair with you?" So we got a great reputation, and we're very proud of it. And we try to live by the golden rule, not only
Mhm.
in everyday dealing with customers and vendors, but also in our acquisition processes.
A lot of the companies that you've acquired as well, they have served in the industry. They've been on boards, they've been presidents of the associations and things like that. So, they all have a pretty high profile. So that can actually really work to your
Yeah.
advantage.
Yeah. We're not strangers.
Right.
We're kind of a known quantity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate your time. This has been very interesting. And I think, as I said before, there was a lot of unknowns
Yeah.
that people are very fearful of, but hopefully we've cleared a few of those up.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed speaking with you again. And again, you did a great job at our annual meeting. The team really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, I can't get in front of people physically, so now I got to get up in front of Zoom, but at least, hey, I'm getting a chance to reach out to people
Great.
again. So,
Well, thanks for
yeah.
having me, Jason.
Hey, well, thank you. Take care.
Okay. You too.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz of the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by Connected Peers Organization. CPO is a new organization dedicated to providing fast-paced monthly networking opportunities for industry peers. To learn more about how CPO can bring solutions to your role, visit us on the web at www.connectedpeers.com.